Hi, so this is video number 2 of the Vintage Star Quilt Along. And today I'm going to show you how I foundation paper piece with freezer paper. So these templates were printed onto freezer paper with the templates from the PDF. I have already used these once. These were my originals from my first quilt that I made. So I just wanted to show you that you can use them more than once so you won't have to waste your papers. And so that's the reason we're reusing these, because I wanted to show you how easy it is to do that. So when you're foundation paper piecing, the wrong side of your fabric goes against the freezer paper side of your freezer paper. So that's the plastic side. And these pieces will go on like this. Now, what you want to make sure of when you're foundation paper piecing is that your fabric goes at least 1/4 of an inch past where you're going to be sewing, which this is your seam line right here. This is a seam line and this is a seam line. This is a cut line. These are seam lines, but those are for later. So these are the first ones that we're going to do, these center lines. So make sure that your fabric is going past all of these lines, this line and this line, by at least 1/4 of an inch. Now this could be all the way over here, right on the edge, and it would be fine because it's still 1/4 of an inch away from the seam line. And you have 1/4 of an inch over here and at least 1/4 of an inch at the point and all the way around. So you make sure that your fabric goes all the way around at least 1/4 of an inch past your seam lines. So you could put it there and that would be fine. I don't like to do that just because when I'm pressing, I might accidentally scoot it and I might have a too scant of a seam line. So what I'm going to do is put it in the center a little bit. And I'm going to take my iron. This is my little mini iron and my mini ironing board so that you guys can see what I'm doing. It's really not that hard. It's just like pressing anything else. So we're going to take our piece and we're just going to press to that line, and you can go over a little bit, but just press it till it sticks. And as you can see, it's stuck really good. And I've already, like I said, already used this freezer paper once. So that just proves you can definitely use this more than once. I can use them up to 3, sometimes 4 times when I'm doing this. So first thing you're going to do is press to all of your number 1 pieces. The other thing I wanted to show you just real quick is I got fancy and I did A pieces and B pieces. So this one says B, this one says A, but guess what? They're exactly the same. So don't worry if you get them mixed up. It doesn't matter. You can use them interchangeably because they're exactly the same. And when I put it this way, it makes the perfect block. So you can see that it doesn't matter. There isn't really a reverse on these. You can use them either way. So what I'm going to do first is go ahead and press to all of my number 1 pieces. So this is how we're going to chain piece our foundation pieces. So just make sure it's right there in the center. Now I know these are stripes and I am not being fussy about which way the stripes are going because I don't mind if they go in different directions or look a little wonky. It's kind of my idea for this quilt is I wanted it to be a little crazy. So, but if that's something that bothers you, don't use a fabric that's directional for your contrast or your triangles. So just be careful about that. If stripes going in different directions bothers you, don't use them for this quilt. You'll want to use something that's like a solid or a non-directional floral or something like that. Okay. So I am just now, see, I got that a little bit too close to the edge. So I'm just going to reposition a little bit. I'm pressing just to the line. Now, if I go a little over the line, it's no big deal. I'll show you in a moment how that doesn't even matter. Okay, and I'm putting right side down and the paper over the top of it. Okay, so those are all pressed on. Now all I'm going to do is just pull it away a little bit from the fabric so that that line is available. This is a add a quarter ruler. If you've never done foundation paper piecing, you may not have seen this one. This is an add a quarter plus, which means it has this pointy, not pointy, but like a beveled edge on one side. So it's very thin on one side. And the reason that we need that, and by the way, you don't need an add a quarter ruler. If you don't have one, I'm going to show you in just a moment how you can not have one and it works just fine. But what I'm going to do with my add a quarter ruler is put it up against right where the line is, right where my seam line is. And I'm going to flip back my foundation paper, in this case, my freezer paper. And I am going to flip over my add a quarter ruler. And the reason these are great is they've got a little lip here on the edge and a 1/4 of an inch on the edge of them, right next to that lip. That little lip slides right up against your paper and it gives you a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So you can trim away your foundation. I'm sorry, not your foundation. You can trim away your fabric. And then you have your 1/4 inch already cut. Why is that great? Well, because when you go to put your next piece on and you leave your paper turned back, you go to put on your next piece, you can just line it right up against the edge and you already have your 1/4 inch. You don't have to go and cut that again after you've sewn. Okay, so let me show you what to do if you don't have an add a quarter ruler, and then we'll come back to this. Here's my next piece. And what I have is just a postcard or a piece of cardstock. And I had it laying right here. And of course, now I can't find it. Where are you? I had a piece of cardstock sitting right here. Oh, there it is. Okay. So I just have a little piece of cardstock. It's just some heavy paper. And I'm going to put that right up against the edge of that seam, where that seam is going to be. And I'm going to flip my paper back, my freezer paper, and then I'll just pull that out. So it's only there just to make that edge easier to find. And then you can take your regular ruler, line up a 1/4 of an inch on the edge of the paper and trim away just like you did with your add a quarter ruler. So you see, you don't need an add a quarter ruler. It's just easier and funner to use it. Funner, don't you like that word? I know. Okay, so what we're going to do then, after we've gotten our 1/4 inch seam allowance along our first seam, and again, all of these directions are in my pattern as well. We're going to line up the seam allowance with the edge of our star point fabric, and make sure that your star point fabric is facing up so that your fabrics are right sides together. Okay, so with the template still turned backwards, we're not going to flip it over to sew because we're not sewing through the paper. And that's what's going to make it easier to not only take the paper off at the end, but also reuse your paper so you don't have to buy more foundations or print more foundations. Okay, so we're going to put it up against the the edge of the fabric with the right sides together, seam allowance showing. And what you want to do is make sure that that fabric is at least a 1/4 of an inch past. I can see where my seam line is right here. And it's at least a 1/4 of an inch past this edge, past that edge, and past this edge. We know it is here because we've lined it up. But see, it's like a little bit close right here. So what I'm going to do is move this down just a little bit so that I can see the fabric on this edge. That way I know it's covering all the way around that triangle. It goes all the way around like this. And I make sure that I have at least a 1/4 of an inch. If you do have a 1/4 of an inch all the way around, when you sew this and you flip it back, you will have plenty of fabric to cover to the next seam line. That is my favorite thing that I have ever learned about foundation paper piecing. I struggled with it for so many years, and this saved my life. So I want you to know this is the easy way to do it. Okay, so I do not pin these. I just make sure when I'm sitting at my sewing machine that everything still looks good. So we're going to do that again. I'm going to take this piece and I am going to turn back the edge along my ruler or my cardstock. Put the 1/4 inch edge along the paper and trim. Take my star point fabric and line up the edge. And then I'm going to make sure it goes past all the way around. This one's a little bit close, but it is enough, but still, I don't like it to be that close. I'm going to pull it down a little bit. Now, also, just so you know, if you pre-fold your fabric, it'll make it easier for you to see where that next line is too. So you can, I mean, not fabric, your foundation. If you pre-fold your foundation, you'll be able to see where that next line is, and that makes it a lot easier. So you can see this is where the point is. So I'm at least 1/4 inch past there. I'm at least 1/4 inch past here. And we know what we are on this side because we're lined up against that other fabric. So you just keep doing the same thing with each piece. This seems like it's taking a long time, but that's only because I'm talking and showing you as I go. It's super fast to do this. And so you don't need to worry about that. And once you got it down, it's pretty darn easy. So this is where, oops, wrong side up. Got to put the right side up. Okay, so I've got 4 pieces done. I would do the entire quilt before I even start sewing. Do the first piece on all of the foundations and get them ready to go like this. And then I just stack them up and we'll take them over to the sewing machine. Okay, so here's my sewing machine. And I'm going to put these a little over to the side. Make sure that these stayed in line, and if not, just move them a little bit and put them back where they go. Okay, now what you're going to do is, if you have a Teflon foot for your sewing machine, put your Teflon foot on, or a walking foot, or you can use a little bit of painter's tape to put underneath on the skids of your presser foot, and that'll keep it from sticking to your freezer paper. I am not doing that right now, so you'll probably see that it'll stick a little bit to my freezer paper, but it's not the end of the world. So, but do as I do and not as do as I say, not as I do this time. Okay, so what I'm doing is just sewing right next to the edge of the paper. And let me see if I can focus this a little more so that you can see that better. Okay. So I'm sewing right next to the edge of the paper. I'm not sewing through the paper. And this is how you can chain piece your foundation papers. Now, when I get to the end here, I don't want to have to sew all the way off the end. It's kind of a little bit of a waste. I mean, you could, it doesn't matter really, but I'm just going to lift my needle and move it to the side instead. And I'm just lining these back up and making sure they're going all the way around. And I just continue on. And so you can do this for your whole quilt if you want to. You can just do one star at a time if you want to. however you like. You might want to try, because if this is the first time that you foundation paper pieced or the first time that you have freezer paper pieced, you might want to go ahead and make a test block just so that you get used to the rhythm of doing it. It's a little bit strange the first couple of times. So, okay. So now our first pieces are pieced on. We're going to go over and press them and get ready for the next piece. And I'm going to go ahead and show you one whole block to start with to make it so you feel like you're comfortable with it. So, okay, well, I had a little bit of technical difficulty with my first video, so I am restarting here for you guys. Okay, here is our pieces that we just sewed together. Just pretend they're the same ones. They are exactly the same. The only difference is they're different fabric. So I am just going to press. I've pressed the fabric to the second fabric to the freezer paper. Do that with the second piece. So I'm not sure what I said in the first video, but I was making 2 of the same block. So as you can see, I finished it, but you didn't get to see it because the video got messed up. So here's 2 pieces. They're going to go together and they're going to make this piece. This time I'm just going to make 1 block to show you the rest of this. So. Okay, so now we have done our first seam. We're going to do our second seam. So we take our ruler and we fold back the paper between the fabric number 3 and number 2. And we will 1/4 inch. Do the same with the second piece. So if your paper is not folded yet, you'll want to go ahead and fold it along your ruler. Okay, now I've trimmed those away. Now the next piece is this other corner piece. So it's going to be our green fabric or our contrast fabric. So I'm going to lay this along the angled edge. What I wanted to show you is, and I don't think I showed this to you in the video so far, you can either lay it along the angled edge as long as the fabric is covering all the way around that piece of paper, or you can lay it along the straight edge as long as it's covering all the way around that piece of paper. I'm also not sure what I said in the original video because I talked for another half hour. So just in case I didn't tell you this, I am making these a little crazy. The stripes are all going to go different directions. I'm doing that on purpose. If you do not like that look and are not going for that effect, do not use a directional fabric for either your points or your contrast. If I put this fabric this direction and lay it along the angle, you can see it doesn't cover that piece of fabric. So you know this is not the right direction. Lay it along the straight edge in this case, and then the fabric goes all the way around. On this piece, because we cut them facing this way, on this piece, if I put it along the angle, then that's the right way. So just make sure that you're checking every time that your fabric is going far enough around that piece of paper to not be too short when you flip it back. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back to the sewing machine. We're going to sew that next seam. And again, we're just going to go right in. And if you accidentally go over your piece of paper by a couple of stitches, it's not going to hurt anything. It'll come right off. Just try not to sew all the way along it because that will defeat the purpose. So I'm lining this up along the edge and making sure that's going all the way around the paper. Oops. Got a little bit on the paper there myself. Okay, so it's just that easy. Now we'll turn it back and we'll press this piece. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and use the cardboard this time so you can see that it's the same thing. Fold it back. And what did I do with my ruler? I had it here just a second ago. Oh my goodness, you guys. When I'm doing videos sometimes, I just throw things out of my way. We'll use my big ruler instead. So you just line up that 1/4 of an inch on your ruler and go ahead and trim away. Or you can use your add a 1/4 between pieces 4 and 5. And trim. Okay, and this is our last piece for each piece of foundation. Okay, back to the machine. Some people ask if this is an accurate way to do foundation paper piecing, and I have done it a few times now. I'm not going to say I'm an expert at it or that I do it every day, but I will tell you that I have not had a problem with accuracy at all with this. So just so you know, it seems to be pretty accurate. Okay, now I'm hearing a little bit of static. I think that's because I'm coming on and off of the chair, but hopefully you guys aren't getting any static on my microphone. Okay, I'm going to press this so that the whole piece of paper is pressed down to the fabric. Okay. What did I do with my ruler? That is really driving me crazy. I like my smaller ruler, but we'll use the big one because we don't have any choice right now. Oh, there it is underneath my ironing board. That's where it was because I had moved it over to show you ironing on the last time I did the video. Okay, so I am just trimming right along the edge of the paper all the way around. And then we will come to the point where this differs from regular foundation paper piecing. So normally with paper piecing, foundation paper piecing, you would leave the paper on until you finish all of your seams, including the ones that put the two pieces together. But we don't do that with freezer paper piecing because we do not want to sew through the freezer paper. So we will be taking the paper off. And that is really the best part of freezer paper piecing. Is that it is so easy to remove the paper. And you can reuse them. These are the third time on these papers because these are the same ones I used to make that other block right there. So you can see it's still sticking just fine. Third time around, and I am going to pull off the paper just like that. Magic. That's where I sewed through the paper right there. Come on, buddy. Normally I only get to catch like a little tiny piece of the paper, but I actually got a little more of the paper this time than I normally do. Okay, there we go. Okay, so here are our two pieces of the block. Now, we will take a pin and I'm going to put it right through where all of the points come together from one side and then right in to the other side where all the points come together. I'm just going to leave that standing up right there. Now these edges are a little bit biased, so you're going to have to be a little bit gentle with this as you sew it together. So I take a pin and put it just on one side of where the standing up pin is, and one just on the other side of it, so that it keeps those seams together. And then I am a pinner, so I am going to pin each side of this. Oh, I almost did it. I tell everyone every time I'm doing a video, my mother was left-handed. She always pins to the wrong side, and so that's how I learned to pin. So I have to remember that the pins go the other direction. Otherwise, I've got them backwards. And it's hard to get them out when I'm sewing. Okay. So this is all pinned and ready to go. We're going to go over to the sewing machine. We're going to sew 1/4 of an inch. And then right here where the points come together, I'm going to sew just to the seam side of that point. And then we'll finish up the seam. And be very gentle when you're sewing because you don't want to be pulling on the edges of this. Okay, so here's my little point. It's probably hard for you guys to see, but I can see it. So I'm sewing right to the edge of that where that point is. That turned a little bit. There we go. Oops, I sewed over my pins. This is why I end up with bent pins all the time. Because I was paying more attention to where the point was than where the pins were. Okay. There we go. And here's the magic. Woohoo! Okay, and so what I'm going to do, if you guys like to sew your seams open, you can do that. I do not like to sew my seams open. So what I'm going to do is turn mine right in the center so that half is going one way and half is going the other. So that we can get rid of some of this bulk from these seams all coming together in the center. Okay, so there is our little block all finished up. And then, and I'll show you this one too, because I've got all of the points here. What we'll do, once all of these center pieces are sewn, is we will put everything up on our design wall in the order we think we want it to go, and we will lay out our points on each of the centers. That way, when we put our alternate blocks, which will be here, here, and here, when we put those together, we'll be sure to have the point on this side and the point on this side being the right color. So it'll go like this. And what I meant by that was if this block was here, we would want to make sure that that point was on the right. So your alternate block would have the right colors going next to each other. And for me, it's always easier if I lay them out on a design wall when I do that. But you can also do that by using your coloring page. Okay, so this is the end of video number 2, and we will do video number 3 next time. See you then.